You want to try sprints, but you're curious about what's the differences between hill sprints and flat sprints. In this video, I'm going to share with you the 6 main differences you want to consider before choosing one over the other. Let's start off by talking about muscle development in hill sprints compared to flat sprints. So we're going to start off by talking about hill sprints, and after that we're going to cover flat sprints. In hill sprints you're obviously running uphill, so you're running against an incline. For this reason the glutes are going to be playing a bigger role compared to on a flat sprint, because when you move up hills you're forced to lift your leg up higher up. So that's why you're getting a lot more hip flexion and also more hip extension. And essentially you also get more glute range of motion in a hill sprint compared to in a flat sprint. So in hill sprints, the hamstrings and the glutes are going to be working with a lot of concentric load, and they're also going to be working under more constant tension, and that is going to give hill sprints an advantage when it comes to muscle mass and hypertrophy. Hill sprints are primarily a hamstring and a glute exercise, but the more inclined the hill is, so the more uphills you're running, the more quads you're going to be getting in as well. But that doesn't mean it's going to be an effective quad exercise. It just means that you're going to be getting more quads in the more inclined the hill is. But keep in mind, it's merely a hamstring and a glute exercise. So if you think about it from a very steep angle, so let's say this is your flat sprint, but now you're increasing the incline all the way to this. Of course it's insane, like you can't run up hills like this, but just to get the idea, in an incline like this, the movement will look a lot like a step up or, for example, a squat pattern. And so just to get the idea that why the quads are involved more in a hill sprint. The next factor when it comes to muscle development in hill sprints is going to be resistance. So of course if you're running up hills, you're moving against more resistance, and therefore I would say it gives a slightly better hypertrophy stimulus compared to something on a flat sprint. Just plain and simple, because you're moving against more resistance. Now let's move on to muscle development in flat sprints. So you're going to be having a bit more hip flexor activation or work in flat sprints, because your leg is going to be a bit further behind your body on flat sprints, which means you're going to be stretching the hip flexor a little bit more. You're also using the hip flexor a little bit more to lift your leg up. Now on flat sprints, the hamstrings are going to be working under more eccentric load. Now it doesn't mean it's going to be that you're going to be using the hamstrings more on flat sprints. You're just using them slightly differently. So more eccentric load are going to be under the hamstrings on flat sprints, and the eccentric load does have some benefit when it comes to hypertrophy as well. So for hamstrings, flat sprints will offer a different benefit for muscle mass and hypertrophy. You're going to be having less knee flexion and more knee extension on a flat sprint. You're also going to be having a longer stride, and because of the longer stride, you're also going to be having a little bit more hamstring range of motion in the movement compared to on a hill sprint, where you have more knee flexion, but on a flat sprint you have more knee extension. So the leg is a little bit straighter on flat sprints compared to hill sprints, and for that reason you also have more of an eccentric component on the hamstrings on a flat sprint compared to on hill sprints.
And hey, if you get some value from this video, then why don't you go ahead and subscribe to the channel right there for more similar videos in the future.
And difference number 2 is going to be force production. So this is pretty straightforward. Because hill sprints have you move against more resistance, you're forced to use more force and power on a hill sprint. So therefore, if you want to improve your force production and strength, hill sprints will take the advantage in this case. And difference number 3 is going to be technique. So on hill sprints, you're forced to sort of lean forward a little bit, which is going to be more similar to the sprinting technique. So in sprints you want to have some sort of a forward lean, and on hill sprints you're forced to have this forward lean. So you're sort of forced to have a proper sprinting technique when you run up hills. The next thing is you're forced to also lift your legs up and lift your knees up when you're sprinting. So again, in sprinting you want to lift your knees up high enough, something that people who haven't maybe done much sprinting, they tend to not have much knee drive, so they don't tend to lift their knees up a lot. But on hill sprints you're sort of forced to lift your knees up as well. So again, the incline is pushing you towards that correct sprinting technique. And the last thing when it comes to technique is that on a hill sprint you're moving a lot slower, which means it's easier to have a proper technique. Whilst on a flat sprint you're obviously moving a lot faster, and the technique might crash down, and it might be just harder to run with a proper technique. So technique-wise, hill sprints will be more of a better option, or a more technique-friendlier option of those two. And that also naturally leads me to my next point, which is safety slash injury risk. So like I mentioned, on hill sprints you're going to be moving a lot slower, which also means that your limbs will be moving slower. And for that reason it could be potentially a bit safer for some people, especially when it comes to hamstring injuries. I've also mentioned that flat sprints are sort of more effective for hamstring development because they have a bigger eccentric component for the hamstring. That eccentric component on the hamstrings is also quite often the reason why someone might have a hamstring injury when they do sprints. But on hill sprints, again, you have less eccentric component on hamstring. You also move slower, so the limbs are moving slower, and so therefore I think it's safe to say that hill sprints could be a little bit safer than flat sprints. Not to say that flat sprints are dangerous, but just something to take into consideration when you compare the two. And the other thing with safety regarding sprints is that hill sprints have less impact on the joints. So one more thing that could tip it in favor for the hill sprints when it comes to safety. The next difference is going to be fatigue and recovery demands. Sprints in general do require a lot of resting in between sets because it's requires a lot of power output. But hill sprints I would say require even more power output because again you're moving against more resistance, so you need to just use a lot more power to get up the hill. And for that reason it's likely that hill sprints require more recovery, but again the sprint distance also plays a big role in which one is more fatiguing. So if you do like 200-meter flat sprints and then you do 30-meter hill sprints, then you might even it out, or maybe even it's even heavier on the flat sprints. So sort of a gray area, I would say, a little bit, but I will tilt it more towards the hill sprint when it comes to recovery demands and fatigue. The next one is going to be speed and explosiveness. So here's pretty straightforward. Because you move a lot faster on flat sprints are going to be much more effective at developing maximum speed and explosiveness. Just because you move a lot faster on flat sprints compared to on hill sprints. And not saying that hill sprint doesn't train that, but these are just the small differences that you need to take into consideration when comparing both of these two. Now, which one should you choose of these? Well, ideally, both, because they have both different benefits. I will probably lean a little bit more towards hill sprints because of the muscle mass benefits, the strength benefits, also the technique and safety aspect we spoke about. But when it comes to muscle mass, flat sprints did offer their unique aspect of eccentric loading on the hamstrings. So that's why I will do both. And I also wouldn't think too much about this. If you're just a normal, recreational trainee who just wants to be healthy and fit and try different things, then just do the one that calls for you the most. Which one is more appealing for you? Which one do you find more interesting and more fun? Do that. And at some point you might want to change, so you might go from hill sprint to flat sprints, and then you might go from flat sprints to hill sprints, depending on which one is calling for you the most. But I personally will probably do more of hill sprints than flat sprints, but ideally you will do both because both have different benefits to offer. Now that you know the main differences between hill sprints and flat sprints, you might want to learn more about how effective sprints are for muscle mass really. So for that reason I recommend that you have a look at this video right here. It's going to teach you the reasons why sprints are or are not effective at building muscle. Hope you got some value from this video. If you did, then please go ahead and leave this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more similar content in the future, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.